Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Star Wars Andor Episode 1. So I will start spoiler free because it is a first episode, and there's not too much to spoil in this because, like lots of first episodes, it's mostly just setting up the premise and the start of the story. So there's not too much to actually spoil per se. But I get into it. I'm reviewing this because it ranked highly on the Patreon pilot vote, which happens every month over on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. My patrons, and partly being a little cruel because they know I don't like Star Wars very much, voted for me to watch this and talk about the pilot. They did put out the first 3 episodes, I think, of this today, or yesterday, I should say. So you can watch the first 3 right now. But this is the latest in the line of Star Wars spin-offs that Disney Plus have made. They've done The Mandalorian, they've done Boba Fett, and some animated shows, things like that. What's funny about this is that I actually thought this first episode of Andor was fairly good. I think it's easily the best of the first episodes of these Star Wars shows that I've tried, because I've tried a few of them. Obi-Wan was the other one, which I didn't think was very good, just based on the first episode. I'm not a big Star Wars guy. I don't really care about Star Wars lore. I didn't even like Rogue One that much, which is obviously the most relevant thing to this because the main character is from that movie, and this is a prequel story about that character. I think what I appreciated about this first episode, though, is that it was fairly focused, straightforward, and had a good, distinct atmosphere away from what I associate from the rest of Star Wars, which is, it feels a little bit grimier. It feels like we're on this, rundown planet, rundown city. And early on in the episode, Andor gets into a position where he accidentally kills someone who's not a nice person, but accidentally kills someone in self-defense, and ultimately ends up killing a second person to cover it up. And that's our starting point for the show. Whilst he's also looking for his long-lost sister, which is what he's doing at the start. And this episode is largely about him just kind of trying to cover his tracks, deal with whatever criminal stuff he's involved in, as well as like sort of this main villain. I'll say there's this security guard dude, who works for the security like firm that's on this planet, and he, despite orders from up above, is determined to find out who committed this murder. So he's clearly going to be the main antagonist. At least that's what it seems like from the first episode. So yeah, things that I would get off straight away is I know that this one, compared to the other Star Wars shows, was shot with actual sets and more locations than just doing sort of rear projection or green screen stuff. Obviously there's still some of that because it's a sci-fi show with spaceships and shit, but it feels a bit more real in that sense. Just early on, like, there's shots of him walking around like these like alleyways in the rain. There's a good bit of mood to it. It feels like it's not trying too hard to be overly Star Warsy. There's like one scene with a droid sort of scaring away like a big rat looking thing that's trying to piss on it, that felt like, oh, that was a bit of Star Wars cutesiness. Other than that, there wasn't really much in the way of like, oh, we have to kind of ram down your throat that this is Star Wars. It was mostly just, here's a story about a guy who's living on the fringe and clearly isn't perfect, but maybe you can get behind his noble search for his sister. And some people around him hate his guts, some people around him seem to be allies, despite the fact that he's a bit of a pain to put up with. I thought that was all handled fairly well, and things mostly look better than the other Star Wars shows that I've seen. Comparing this to Obi-Wan and Boba Fett, I thought this was a much more visually appealing show, just because it felt a bit more real, it felt a bit more lived in, it felt a bit more tactile, I guess. Just little things that just made it feel a bit better. It's not to say that I liked every single scene or that there wasn't anything, or even my typical complaint with these Disney Plus shows is that they're too short and that a single episode doesn't give you enough. I still think that complaint kind of sits here because like it's like, but once you take off the closing credits, you're like 32 minutes or something like that. It's not a lot for what's supposed to be a serious drama show. And Disney Plus have had that problem with most of their originals, to be honest. Very few of them have felt like they've been the right length. So I did feel like I didn't get a full chapter by the end. It felt like it was kind of, and I know that the next couple are out already, but I'm not going to accept that as an excuse. If this is supposed to be an episode, it's supposed to be a full episode. The fact that they put out a few together at the start does not excuse the fact that episode 4 next week might feel the same way, or 5 or 6 or so on. So, and I wouldn't excuse it in a streaming service show either. That's binge style like Netflix. I wouldn't excuse it there. So I'm not going to excuse it here either. But I do think what is here is better than what I've seen from these shows typically up until now. And I think, like I say, I appreciate that it just sort of gets down to basics and wants to try and sort of set up a world that this character lives in, set up his supporting cast, and set up his antagonist. His antagonist specifically, who I think is named Karn, but he's like the security officer who is investigating this incident at the start of the episode, this murder that Andor's kind of committed. Albeit not because he was looking for murder in cold blood. It was kind of, they tried to rob him, they tried to mug him and extort from him, and he fought back, and he just accidentally killed one of them. This security guy, he is determined to find his man, but he's superior, and I really like this scene. It may be my favorite scene of the whole episode. Is the superior is basically very quickly saying, "This is not worth their effort and time. There's a lot of reasons why we shouldn't look into this. There's a lot of corruption here on this planet, and the fact that these guys were in this district when they worked for us, because these were actually security guys who were killed at the start. They work for them, and they're not really supposed to be in this dodgy part of town. They're not really supposed to have brothels like the one that they were at, and they're certainly not be able to afford brothels like that. So there's a lot of questions here that should not be asked or answered. And he would rather cover it up and say it was just some unfortunate accident as quickly as possible. And obviously this young guy is he's determined to find out the wrongdoing anyway, and goes behind the guy's back when he leaves for a conference thing to go and basically give the Empire his report of security going ons on this planet. I think I liked this scene a lot because it did a really good job of, first of all, really reaffirming what this world is, because this guy sort of points it all out in a way that doesn't feel forced. It gives a lot of exposition in a way that doesn't feel like he's just explaining it to the audience. He's grilling this younger security guy and telling him to do what he's told, despite the fact that it's not necessarily going by the book. And the fact that this young guy clearly doesn't like this, and he wants to investigate it and then continues to do so for the rest of the episode, also tells a lot about his character. He's out to prove himself. He's out to be the loyal Empire security guard. So I think it does a good job of explaining the world and explaining our antagonist, and it makes the antagonist perhaps more interesting than he's just this evil dude and he might still be evil, but he's got this more specific motivation, or this more specific type of character where he's got ambitions and he wants to be the best of the best at what he does, even though his superiors are trying to tell him that that's not really the world that he lives in. It's funny how it's kind of just a slight twist on a hero's story. It's often heroes in movies and shows, you'll get a story where they join the police or something like the police with the best of intentions because they want to do good, only to find out that it's kind of corrupt and that they're not really going to achieve any of the noble things that they set out for, or why they wanted to do that in the first place. This is kind of that, but it's just this twist in it slightly where he's going to be coming after our protagonist, and he's also kind of awful to the people he works with. He threatens the people that the people that work beneath him. He threatens with firing if they don't do what he says and things like that, even though the word from the top is that they shouldn't be doing any of this anyway. It presents him as this hungry, out for himself, he'll stop at no cost kind of guy, but not necessarily for a noble reason per se. Or maybe it is noble to him. Maybe he feels like he is a loyal soldier to the Empire and he wants to see this through no matter what kind of thing. But the fact that the people on this planet who are working within that system are still the best thing for us is just to the less the Empire comes asking questions and leaves us alone and doesn't think about us, the better. Again, reaffirms the world. So I think in terms of world building, this was a very strong first episode. And it did it with just 2 or 3 key scenes that I really think were quite good. And not that the rest of the scenes were bad. There's a couple of good scenes that set up some of the friends that Andor has. One of whom is a woman whose name is Bix, I think, and sets up that she's kind of an ally. Maybe there was something between them at some point. It's hard to tell. And then another friend who he goes to sort of establish an alibi for the night before in case like anyone comes asking. And the guy, when he gets that he's been asked to give an alibi without ever knowing what the alibi's for, he kind of goes along with it to show that he is willing to stick his neck out for him. And it feels like he does have a lot of people willing to stick out the neck for him, but maybe it's eventually going to get them in trouble, which is maybe going to play into some of the character story we're going to play with, is maybe he's going to end up feeling guilty. The fact that we get flashbacks to him and his sister when they were kids, and that maybe he's felt guilty all these years anyway for like what's happened to her or how they get separated because of his choices and actions. Dealing with this character has to deal with the responsibilities that his actions are maybe going to get everyone else around him in trouble, even if he has good intentions. And arguably he doesn't have that many great intentions. I mean, right now, other than looking for his sister, he is just kind of a criminal. There's not really a bigger sense in this episode as to any, because in Rogue One, and I don't remember most of Rogue One, but I remember him being very committed to the cause. He doesn't seem to be part of a cause yet in this show, and I'm sure that's part of what the plot of the 2 seasons, I think they said we're going to be coming, are probably going to deal with. But because I'm not necessarily connected to Star Wars really all that much, and I don't really give a shit about how it connects to Rogue One, I think I appreciate that this didn't ram references or connections to future, at least nothing that I noticed that's connecting to future Star Wars movies or appearances or anything like that. It felt very much just, this could be a new show. This could be a new universe in which we're just dropped into this alien planet and we're getting the hierarchy of the security system. Because even like where Andor lives is on this outskirts like town or city that's away from the central city where he commits the murder at the start. So the security forces, when they're talking about it, are like, oh, like, like that ship that you spotted leaving, like that might be out over here in this city, but is it, well, okay, they go and ask them, like, what's go and get cooperation and ask that city to help. And it's like, yeah, they don't really do that. Like, they're kind of this like weird outskirts city who all play by their own rules. It's kind of the Wild West out there. You get the sense of like the rich central city that all of the security headquarters are at, and then Andor's like smaller industrial town that he's in is the maybe the poor area, or it's the area, the working class area. It's away from all that, but there's a lot more shady stuff, or there's just a lot more general kind of like outside of the system stuff going on there. And I got all that from this episode. It kind of it set that up, it reaffirmed it as the episode went on, and I felt like I had a good hold on that. Now, the stuff that Andor says that he's got stolen that he wants to try and like unload soon, like, he mentions it like in a scene, and I don't really have full context for that yet. But as far as setting up the character and the setting, I feel like this first episode does a pretty decent job, albeit without really having what I would call a complete story. I mean, the last time we see Andor in this episode, he's just kind of like talking to a guy, and I guess we're in mild spoilers now, but he's just kind of talking to a guy at the shipyard where he's asking to borrow the ship again, and the guy like says, no, best not, and whatever you were doing the night before, keep me out of it, kind of thing. And it just kind of ends with him looking kind of pensively before we go to our last flashback with the sister in the past. So yeah, there's not really kind of a hook at the end, and there's not really kind of you neither get a hook that feels like, oh, I'm excited for the next episode to see what's going to bring, and there's also no like neat sort of thematic ending to what the episode's been about. So I would say it fails as an episode of TV, and that it gives you neither of what a TV episode should give you by the end of an episode. And with episode ones, it tends to be a hook. It tends to be less of a thematic endpoint and more of a hook, which could be a twist, it could be a reveal, but it doesn't have to be. It can just be a development. It can just be something that leads into what's coming next. And I feel like it doesn't do that. It doesn't even try to do that. It has that, you're going to watch the next one anyway because it's there already kind of attitude. And that would be fine, except like if you want to get away with that, then make it one episode. Join them together. These first 3 that get put out, put them together and say it's a special 90-minute debut, and then you get the individual episodes afterwards. For some reason they're not doing that. I guess it sounds better to say you've got 3 episodes to watch on day one, but as someone who respects the craft of writing for TV and what a TV episode should feel like, I will critique that and say that it does feel unfulfilling by the end because of that. But what is in the episode, I do think there's a decent job of setting up the world and the characters around Andor. I wouldn't say anything from Andor himself makes him likable or makes him worth rooting for. Obviously, him looking for his sister is inherently a little noble, but I would say that it's more that the characters around Andor seem to keep sticking their neck out for him, which won't work forever. Like, eventually you have to give me a reason to care about Andor himself by, seeing him make a good choice or a heroic action of some kind or something, some reason to root for him. But because it is such a short bite, it's only the first 32 minutes of the story, just getting a sense that people who seem to be mad at him a lot but are still willing to do things for him, are still willing to cover for him, those characters around him do a job in this first episode of at least getting you by to the point where, okay, everyone else seems to think he's worth sticking their neck out for, there must be something to him. And that can eventually feel phony if they don't back it up with Andor himself earning your respect. It's a very loud vehicle. I don't know if that picked up on the mic, but there was a loud motorbike or something outside that was really loud there. But I until you earn that from Andor yourself, that could become a problem potentially if they don't do that. But for the first 30 or so minutes of the story, I think that's an interesting way to tease it and makes you think that he probably is worth rooting for. And obviously people who are fans of Rogue One probably already think he is worth rooting for, but I'm going to ignore that, partly because I don't like it, partly because I don't remember much of it, and partly because it should function on its own. This should work on its own, where it'll earn you liking the character as it goes through the story. And the argument, maybe that does that in episode 2 and 3, which are already out, and you can check them out if you like. But so I appreciate it. And I think the show starting in a brothel as well. The opening sequence is him walking through the rain and getting into a brothel and being offered different types of girls. That immediately sets your tonal meter a little bit, because it's okay, this is a little bit more adult than some of the other Star Wars stuff that that exists. Not all of it. I'm sure there's other maybe Mandalorian went kind of dark at places, or maybe Boba Fett did. I can't remember, but it's setting up the idea that this is going to be more of a crime gritty character style show as opposed to your typical Star Wars stuff. It's obviously, it looks like it's set in the Star Wars universe. You recognize the blasters, you recognize the ship styles and things like that, but it wouldn't have to be, right? There's nothing in this that doesn't work if it's not an original show with just new characters and new names in a new property. And I respect that. I think that's it should work like that, and I'm glad that it kind of does. So most of my real critiques of this episode are just that it doesn't feel like a full enough chapter where there's actually a full plot or arc or a good hook by the end to make you want to watch the rest of it. The flashbacks do end with a bit of a tease with him going off to find this crashed ship and leaving his little sister behind. I don't know if that's meant to be the last time he sees her, or if it's going to be something that plays out for episodes and episodes until they get separated. I suspect it won't be the last time because it feels too early, but we can see how it goes. But so if people were expecting me to shit in this, honestly, no. I thought it was. I have some critiques from a writing standpoint about it being formatted as a TV episode, where I don't think it's the full episode, really. But as far as the content that's in here, I think it's actually a pretty solid first 30 minutes of a story that has some nice signposts for character building and has a decent bit of world building and the type of attitudes and themes that we're going to be playing with in the show, which is because if you compare the two characters, and with the two characters, I mean Andor and the security guy, Karn, who's going to be kind of, at least right now, seems like the primary antagonist, is they're both not neither one or the both at the top of the respective worlds, right? Karn is a lower down, he's not so low down, he's got people that work under him, but if you compare him to Andor, he's doing stuff that he's not supposed to because his superiors told him not to do it. but he's doing it anyway. So he's kind of like Andor, and he's doing stuff he's not supposed to, even though technically by the book he is. It's kind of an interesting flip. But then you also have the idea that Andor is able to convince people to do things for him, who are friends, who want to help him. Even if they're reluctant, ultimately they're willing to help him out because they see something in him worth helping. Whereas Karn, by comparison, is threatening, people their jobs and saying, no, you'll be fired if you don't do this. We hear his employees or the people that are lower down the food chain saying, can he even approve overtime? That'll be a problem if he don't get paid. They're kind of questioning, like, can he even make us do this? Can he actually follow through in these promises he's making? So you see how one is getting people to work for them in one side of the story versus the other in the villainous side. And I think that's a really interesting comparison where you can kind of compare those two characters and how they interact with the people around them. Now, admittedly, you can still argue that Andor is manipulating people and perhaps they will all regret helping him. That's a possibility. And then you can maybe say that at least Karn, the security guy, is being very honest and upfront about how he's doing things. And, there's no, like, assuming he can approve the overtime, as they theorized, there's nothing shady about his intentions. They know where they stand with him. He's a prick, but they know he's a prick, and they know that he just wants them to work as they're supposed to, or go above and beyond or whatever. He's just a shitty boss, effectively. Whereas, if Andor gets the people around him in trouble because they help him, he is talking people into things. He's kind of playing on the idea of them caring about him. And maybe that explores a darker side to his character. There's stuff there to look at. I think, if nothing else, after these 30 or so minutes, I've got some character analysis and stuff to theorize on, which I don't always do when I get these 30-minute Disney Plus premiere episodes. So the fact that it stoked that part of my brain is worth complimenting and worth saying, hey, this show might be something. It might be worth checking out. So there you go. That's my thoughts on Andor episode 1. Let me know what you think of the first episode, or first episodes if you've watched the 3 of them, in the comments. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications. Of course, you can support all the content and the channel by hitting the super thanks button for a one-time donation, or going over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and supporting us on a more regular monthly basis, and get some bonuses for your troubles. But otherwise, that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?